In the fast-paced world of business, finding a clear path to profitability can be a challenge. Welcome to 0 to 100 with your host, Jared Guy Randolph, seasoned business and finance expert. Tune in for actionable insights and strategies to accelerate your business success.
Hello, Accelerators. It is time for another 0 to 100, and today I am very excited to introduce our guest, Travis Weaver. Travis is co-founder and partner in Weaver Firm Attorneys. He has an extensive background in dealing with real estate, elder law, trust and estates, business, does everything under the sun that you need to get your legal stuff in order personally and for your business. He has a JD and an MBA from Texas Tech, so the guy is brilliant and super charismatic. He is also, for the last 3 years, named to the Texas Monthly Rising Star Attorney, which is a big deal. He's a hot shot, and we've got him on here, and we're going to talk about some great topics. Things like, first and foremost, what you should expect from your business attorney, and frankly, what to ask them, because sometimes you sit down in front of your attorney, you don't even know what to ask. Also, short-term versus long-term planning. The business structures that are going to be the best for your business, depending on where it is, and also for tax efficiency. And then looking at insurance, but looking at insurance and bifurcating the difference between personal insurance and business insurance and making sure everything is in order so there aren't issues when you have to tap into that insurance. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jared Guy Randolph. I am the founder of BoxFi. We are the nation's leading payment consultant, providing business growth solutions through payment processing. And I'm very excited to share the network that I've built over my 25-year entrepreneurial journey to help you grow your business and become more profitable. Ladies and gentlemen, let's accelerate together. Travis Weaver, it is great to have you on 0 to 100.
Well, it's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So we're going to have our first legal conversation of 2025. And what we're going to cover in this conversation is business law and estate planning, and how the two should marry together for success. And this is something that our audience is going to get a lot out of. So thank you for joining us. So Travis, give us a little background on you and how you got into the business and your passion for what you do every day before we jump into the nitty gritty.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born into the business, I guess you would say. My dad is an attorney, and he's been practicing now for almost 40 years. When I went to law school, I had no idea, like most people, what I wanted to do. And then I was able to work with a few families through a clerkship program and kind of help them with some estate planning, some guardianship needs. And I figured out this is really the area that I wanted to pursue. It was just a coincidence that my dad happened to do the same thing, because I had never really wanted to go down that avenue. But it's been fun. And I like working with individual families on their unique problems. And that's really the majority of what we do.
So what are some of the things that the estate and business planning attorneys miss when they're going in? Like, what are the gaps that need to be filled for a lot of the business owners and families who bring a legal team on?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, you get a lot of people that have, hundreds of pages of documents that they really don't understand. And then on the other side, you get people with absolutely no type of planning. And what I tell people is we're trying to kind of meet in the middle, right? I want you to have a plan that is legal, right? That makes sense, but is something that you can go back and review and that you understand. Because if it's 400 pages of legalese, you don't know what's going on. If I ever leave the picture, or if you go to a different state or something else, you're not sure what you have and what you don't have. Same way, if you have nothing, if something happens, then you're kind of at the mercy of whatever the state laws at that point say. And that's not really something you want to do, because then you get involved in the courts. So, I want people to have a plan, have a concise plan, but it doesn't have to be this huge, elaborate plan. It's something that you can understand, and hopefully you can pass that on to whoever your successors are, because that's really what we want.
Got you. So let's paint a picture of what the avatar looks like for our podcast listener. They've been in business 5+ years. They're doing 2 million to 5 million in top line revenue. They're the breadwinner of the family. The family depends on the business that they operate. Have a couple kids. They're probably in their early plus 40s. and they're starting to look at what the next 10, 20 years of their life is going to look like. They don't necessarily have these elements in place. What is the foundation of starting to plan successfully for your business and for your family?
So I would say at least two different things to think about. You're going to want a short-term plan of succession that's there for an emergency, right? You're going to want something to say who takes over in case something happens to you. Where does your business go? Is that to business partners? Is that to your family? But what happens there? Do you have insurance to cover expenses? Do you kind of know what will happen day to day? So that's short term, maybe even 5 to 10 years. You have a plan there. And that's really only for an emergency. And we understand that emergencies happen, but that's unlikely that we're going to need that. You've got something there in writing in place that says who's in charge and where does my business go? Does it keep going? Do I sell it? What's the price? That type of thing. That's pretty straightforward. And that'll get you where you can sleep a little bit better at night. Then the second part is it's kind of long-term planning, right? Because most cases, if you've gotten to the point where your clients are, you're not going to go backwards, right? You're going to keep growing the business, and that's what we want. So as you grow the business, how can we prepare for that growth and have a plan in place, whether it's adding partners, whether it's allowing for growth in our documents? We want there to be some type of plan for that growth so that we kind of have that plan that's set. You don't have to meet with a lawyer every single year unless you really want to, and you feel comfortable as that growth comes, you're prepared and you can add on to that business.
So when you bring that legal team in, you're creating that preparation. Like what questions should you be asking? What should you expect out of your legal team? Like a lot of times people, when they go in to work with an attorney, they might work with an attorney to do contracts, or they might work with an attorney on a real estate transaction, but they actually don't know the basis of what they should be asking and expecting when working with someone as a business or an estate attorney.
Yeah. And that's how we see a lot of people who come in. They tell me something like, I don't even know the questions to ask, or I don't know the right or wrong questions to ask. And that's totally okay. That's really my job is to kind of, hopefully present you with a questionnaire or some things up front so that you can start thinking about, okay, what would happen if something were to happen to me in a year? What do I want to happen in the next 20 to 30 years? And that way the person can come in and tell me a little bit about business dynamics, family dynamics. Do we get along with our family? Is this something we want to pass on to the family? Or is this something that, we're going to get bought out in the future, but we have a plan there kind of with what we want to do? I would ask the attorney about costs. Is this something where, we're taking me on as a retainer for your business? Are you paying a flat fee? Is it hourly? Do you understand the costs? Because if you don't understand the costs, or if the attorney can't explain the costs up front, that might be something that shifts you somewhere else, because you want to know how much you're going to spend on this. It can't just be something that's open. And then you want to think about, is this a ongoing relationship with the attorney? Do I call you when I need things? What is your time frame to get documents back to me? Are you really busy? And if I need a contract reviewed in 48 hours, can you do that? Or is that something that I need to go to a different type of firm to do? I think those are the good questions to ask because that's really what you're looking for, right? You have something emergent come in, you're talking to the attorney, I really need this done in 24 to 48 hours. And if that person can do that, you know what they're charging, and then you feel comfortable handing that off to the attorney so that you can focus on your business.
You said something interesting, cost, and this isn't something we typically dive into, but is there, let's say you've got that business that fits that avatar, that $2 to $5 million business. You're just starting your planning. Is this an expense of $10,000, $50,000, $100,000? Like, is there a range in which you should be considering when you're putting together let's call it a comprehensive plan to make sure you have short-term and long-term built in there? Is there a range?
I would say yes. And I think that, attorneys are kind of like medical providers, where the costs are sometimes hard to get at, and sometimes the range can be huge. But I think a reasonable range for a startup, for someone, and not even a startup, but that starting relationship, right? Initial documents, kind of that initial planning, you should be under $10,000 in terms of what you're paying for. as you grow your business, if you're doing advanced tax planning, or if you're really trying to add people into some type of big employee plan or something like that, then you may be above and beyond that. But for $10,000, that should really get you started with the right documents, with a couple of meetings, right? Because it's probably going to take us more than one. And that's what I would look at. I would look at initial total flat fee costs. And we should be able to tell you that after what you've told us about your business. And then how much are they going to charge per hour? Is that one attorney charging one rate and then maybe other people charging lower rates? Or is that everything is billed at a certain rate? That way you kind of know, if I'm calling you and talking to you for 15 to 30 minutes, it's going to cost me X amount of money. So maybe I gather all my questions together. Or if you've paid them a certain amount and that gives you a certain amount of meetings, you can really expand more on your questions. But I think knowing what those costs should be and kind of knowing how the relationship is going to work is important.
Word to the wise when you're talking to your attorney, to your point, have your questions ready to go. Those are billable 15-minute increments. Don't talk about the kids and what you did over the weekend. Dive into it and get done what you need to get done. Then when you're doing something casual or having dinner, you can have that conversation. I've learned that I guess I should say the hard way over the years. So if we're looking at bringing in, let's say we bring in a business attorney, let's set it outside of the estate planning or planning side. From an operational standpoint for the business, what should we be considering and expecting from that attorney to help us with improving the operations internally for our business?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think you want to make sure, if you've got people working for you, right, that attorney can review your contracts, review your policy for maybe terminating people, for adding people, but just to make sure that everything there is laid out in kind of ironclad, right? If you're bringing in people to work for you, how I can hire them, how I can fire them, compensation, what state the laws are based on, that type of thing. I think we want to look at, what are you doing on a daily basis that might require some type of legal paperwork, right? Do you have a lease for a real estate, or do you have some type of thing where you're getting contracts in or you're having to negotiate with people? That attorney should be able to review your documents and make sure that everything looks good. If we can beef up the language, that's great. If we can simplify it, that might save you some time down the road. But I think that they should be able to kind of do an overview of your operations and make sure you're, number one, complying with the law, which is important. Some people aren't. But number two, there may be loopholes, or there may be things that can kind of improve your business or make it easier on you. And they should be able to tell you that.
I love that you just gave all of those examples, because this is what's key to our audience of listeners, is understanding how to activate the information and to go to the right business attorney to help with all of these aspects as your business grows. So when you're 2 million plus, when you're 3 million plus, 5 million plus in revenue, that's a real business. You have employees, you have responsibilities, and you also have assets. So protecting them, and sometimes it's your intellectual property. Sometimes it is people. Hiring and firing are two really important things that you need to make sure you have the right procedures in place. And I've been caught in this years ago, and it was not a fun experience. And it's something that I also had to learn as a very hard lesson. You have to protect yourself within your business. And that's why we share this information. So thank you for that. Very, very important. So let's talk about, if we have a business owner that wants to start looking at succession planning, is there a time in which it's too early? Is there a time in which it's too late? Like, what is the secret sauce where you're growing your business that you should start planning for what happens next?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something, I think, probably the number one thing that I see mistakes being made when I have people come in is they haven't thought about really long term. They've probably thought about an emergency situation, but they haven't thought what they want to do down the road. So let me kind of give you an example of someone I've worked with before. We work with people who operate farms, and these are not, mom and pop farms, but these are large farms with, maybe 1,000 plus acres, and they're making some really good profit. Maybe they've inherited it in the family, but they've got one family member who works for them on the farm, and this person's making good income. They're adding value to the business, but their entire livelihood is tied up with this farm. And then they have another either child, niece, nephew, that type of thing, who isn't involved in the farm, but probably would be involved in their succession plan. So you've got to think short term. Okay, can this farm continue to operate with my family member who's working with me, right? It's probably going to continue to make money, and this person's going to need to benefit from that. But how are we going to split short-term profits with both family members or with multiple partners there if one's more involved and one's not involved or less involved? And then long-term, how do we want this to pass to our potential beneficiaries? There are tax planning things to think about, right? How can we lower our tax burden? But there are also just kind of the in and outs of a family relationship. If you're leaving the majority of a farm, an operating business to someone, and they're really having to do the work, but they're going to benefit from that operation, how is the other person going to feel? Even though they necessarily don't provide as much to the farm, they're still going to feel that as a slight, and then that can open the door for litigation down the road. So having something in place, emergency, but really long-term, thinking about who gets what percentage, and then where do our profits go? And is this something that's really viable for my business? Is it going to take, more than one or two people to operate? That's what I would say. I think I would really focus on, and that would avoid fights and lawsuits down the road.
It's interesting that you brought this up from the context of that example with the farm and the different family members and the roles that they play. Talk to me about how to structure a good partnership when you have 2, 3, 4 people who start a business together, because one of my mentors told me at one point in time, no partnership is ever equal. No partnership is ever truly equal. So make sure the compensation structure highlights that, so nobody gets upset at the end of the day. I think it works, but sometimes I've seen it go the opposite direction where it doesn't really work. But how do you create that perfect partnership where everyone is protected and everyone gets what they feel like they deserve?
So I'm going to borrow a page from Warren Buffett, and he recently came out with his annual letter. And one of the things he talked about was communicating well with your family members about what's happening in terms of inheritance or succession plan in a business, right? Just talking to them. And I think that's where I would start. So if you have someone who's running a business and they're bringing on partners or family members as partners or some mix there, communicating, okay, this is how much work we're doing right now. This is the value that you're creating. But if something were to happen to me, a certain percent would go to this person and a certain percent would go to this person because of what you're doing, and kind of explain why. Usually the person who's working for the business, they are crucial to that business continuing on, and they probably have hopefully the same vision that you have. And so they know they can take the business and continue to run with it. But we're going to take some of those profits and direct those to our other family members. And so letting the person who's working for you know, look, this is going to happen because I need to take care of my other family member. The lion's share still goes to you because you're doing the work, but this is how we're going to split things up percentage wise. And we think that that's fair, or I think that's as best as we can do right now. And talking to them before something happens instead of having a document in place afterwards, I think really helps kind of get through to them what your wishes are. And if Warren Buffett's telling us to do that, it's probably a good idea.
Have you ever seen this go completely awry with a family where they end up in litigation and it just becomes a nightmare?
Yes, unfortunately I have. And I've seen it in 2 situations. One situation where we have a meeting and I kind of give people my thoughts, my opinion, and then I'll, produce some type of letter or something with actions to take. And then they never get around to taking those actions, right? So then we have kind of a handshake deal on a business that's worth upwards of $5 million. And you can imagine how that goes, because the handshake deal and the handwritten contract from 1985 don't hold up great in court. So that leads you down a road of really a lot of lawyers' fees, a lot of heartache and strife between family members. The other way it can go wrong is if you have documents in place, but they're not necessarily ironclad, so you haven't had someone really look at them in a while, or we throw together documents, and I say we, the business owner and maybe some family members, right before a person passes away, or if a person gets sick, you're throwing together documents, signing contracts, and trying to allocate a business between multiple people. and we're not sure that the person understands exactly what they're doing. So you still have paperwork, but the paperwork is not necessarily where we want it to be. And those are really the two situations that end up in litigation. And anyone who works with litigators can tell you, in most cases, the lawyers are going to end up making the money and the people are going to be frustrated. And I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and this is really important for our audience of business owners, is you're building something, and most I know are building something because they want to leave a legacy. So leaving a legacy, whether it's your family, your community, or whatever it is, you actually have to have a plan. It's not just about building a product or a service or raking in as much revenue as you possibly can. When something happens, you have to have that plan in place where everyone knows exactly what is going to happen next, and that is key. And one of the key elements, because I want to get back to talking about structure and entities in the business and how those are impacted by succession planning, which we'll come back to. But can you walk us through, you're a business owner. Let's say you're an LLC right now. You continue to grow. Should you stay in LLC? Should you consider becoming a C Corp, an S Corp? Walk us through which each one of those structures mean, and at what point in time in your business you should be considering one over the other.
Sure. That's really one of the more common questions I get. And what I tell people is, think of the LLC for its sole purpose is liability protection. So if you have an LLC right now and you're doing some type of shipping operation where you have people on the road or people going from place to place, then I think an LLC there provides liability protection against someone getting in an accident or, something getting lost or someone getting hurt, right? If you own real estate, any type of land associated with your business, LLCs protect against accidents on the property you own. The LLC is a bubble that protects the business assets, but it also separates those assets from your personal assets. So your house, your bank accounts, those two things are separated. So an LLC is really good for that. You can choose to tax an LLC as a corporation, and that may give you some ability to deduct expenses better, right? So if you're really starting to get some revenue in and you're thinking, look, we're paying a lot in taxes, but we have expenses on vehicles or depreciation of land. We're just doing expensing that usually I would pay for myself, but we're paying for it through the business. There are going to be ways that you can deduct those expenses in a legal way, being taxed as a corporation, even though your entity is an LLC. So thinking about how you want to be taxed is really important. Now, on the other side, you may set up your business as some type of corporation, right? S corporation, C corporation, those just deal with how those entities are taxed with the IRS. And depending on what you're doing and how many people you have for your company, one may be better than the other. And that's where an attorney and a CPA can step in and give you really good advice based on what you're doing with your business right now. And also kind of thinking about the next 5 to 10 years in that succession plan. If we really are going to add employees, maybe that C corporation would be better or an S corporation.
So the difference between a C and an S is the number of employees?
It's part of the difference. The main difference between the two is how they're created and how they're taxed with the IRS.
Can you give us just a brief on the difference between the taxation of the two?
Yes. And keep in mind that, all of this is subject to change and some things have actually just changed in January of 2025. But I think the main thing that you're looking at from an S corporation has special tax status with the IRS. So there are certain things you can do. For example, you can pass your profits through an S corporation. So if you have money that's going into the business and then you want it to go out to your partners, you can allow those profits to pass through to your partners and avoid being taxed on your business and personally. So that's one of those things that an S corporation can do. You fill out the correct paperwork with the IRS and then you're in good shape. A C corporation pays its own taxes. And that's where, there are some benefits there depending on the type of business you're running, but you keep all the profits in the C corporation. You may have larger deductions, but that's really the difference. S corp passes through, C corp pays its own taxes.
is there one, and this may be too general of a question. It might be, you have to understand each business, but is there one of the LLC, S Corp or C Corp that is more tax efficient than the other?
I would say it depends there, and that's my favorite lawyer answer. So the S corporation, you can have 100 shareholders, and that's the limit. So if you want more than that, you need to then switch to a C corporation. So as your business grows, initially the S corporation is going to be more tax efficient for small businesses. And I say small, anything under 100 people or 100 shareholders with your members. For a C corporation, if you have above that, maybe you have 250, 300, or a very large business, a C corporation is really going to give you more advantages at that point. You can issue multiple types of stock. With an S corporation, you're limited to one type of stock, but you may think about, common or preferred stock. You may know what those are. That's a C corporation where you can divide types of stock as your business really starts to take off. So those are kind of the differences there and when you want to consider one versus the other.
So as your business grows, and thank you for that baseline information because that's super helpful, where you can see just from your explanation what the progression could be in your company as it grows and expands. Staying up to date on business structures is tantamount to success. But also what's really important is making sure that your documents are up to date. I know there's probably documents I haven't looked at in quite some time. Some of them I have actually updated with my team recently, and we're now going through everything as the company's continuing to grow. How would you suggest business owners look at the documents that they're working off of and when they should be, or the frequency in which they should be updated?
So I would kind of give two rules of thumb there. I would look at everything in April or May of each year. And the reason behind that, so if you have a corporation, or in most cases, an LLC being taxed as a corporation, that tax return is due in April unless you were to extend. A lot of people will handle it in April. So as you're coming around to that March, April time, right? If you have to file your business tax return, I would take a look at what did the last year look like? Have anything changed? Have people come and gone? Do we need to update documents? Have we grown? Have we added property or something like that? And I would really think about how the last year affected your business and whether or not your current documents reflect that growth or reflect what's happening. Other than that, every 2 years, I would at least sit down with an attorney for a meeting and tell them how the business is going, have them look at your documents, look at everything that's been filed with the state to make sure that things have been filed correctly, and talk a little bit about your situation in your life to make sure that something hasn't changed there that needs a change in your documents.
Very interesting. Wow. So now that we're still on the topic of changes, for 2025, are there tax code changes that our small and mid-sized business owners should be aware of that could negatively or positively impact them?
I think I would say yes. And the real thing to look at over the next year is going to be whether or not there is an estate tax that is extended or is reduced. And this really has nothing to do with either political party, but right now, the current laws for the estate tax, and this includes your business, they are scheduled to sunset or to go away basically at the end of this year. So your total taxable estate right now, if it's $13.99 million or less, you don't pay any federal estate tax on that, which is really good news for a lot of people. At the end of the year, if Congress does nothing to change those laws, that 13.99 million gets cut in half, actually less than half. So you're looking at between $6 and $7 million per person that you can leave tax-free to your family members. A lot of the businesses that you're working with and a lot of the people we see, they are probably somewhere in that range of whether they're 4 to 6 million or 6 to 8 million. We're saying if something changes and if you were to pass away, you could be looking at a 40% tax bill next year if you don't take any action or if you don't at least have the option to take an action this year. I think probably we'll know something closer to October, November, so we can really give guidance there. But if you're thinking about doing some type of planning, or if you've really seen that growth where you're in that $5 to $6 million or $4 to $6 million range in terms of business valuation, you need to consider what your tax situation is going to look like, so you're not stuck with that bill down the road. And that planning really is pretty straightforward.
Very interesting. What I love about these type of interviews, they're educational for me too. I get to learn a lot, and this is incredibly helpful. So talk to me, and this will be a question first and foremost about your business, and then we'll talk about how it might be impacting our listeners' businesses. But talk to me about the legal industry and AI. Are you incorporating it? Do you think it's going to impact the industry? Like, what are the expectations on the horizon for artificial intelligence and the law industry?
I think AI is going to be a tool more than a replacement for the legal industry. But I do think that as lawyers step into this realm, we need to think about how we can use AI to simplify things for us. I think it'll make our businesses more efficient for our clients. We need to avoid using AI as a crutch or as something that can do the work for us. And I think you've probably heard examples about people who use AI to draft their entire argument with the court, and the citations are wrong or the argument doesn't make sense. But I think that even in the last year, the top 100 law firms are using some of the large search engines for legal matters to incorporate AI into drafting memos, doing research for them that should speed up their process, right? Instead of going to a library or even spending hours online searching for cases, you can have an AI companion summarize the top 5 to 10 cases on that subject. And that'll help you be a better attorney, but it'll also help you be more efficient for your client. And so I think that if you're not using AI, at least to some extent, to aid you in your workflow, I think you're going to fall behind in the future, and other people are going to be able to put in the face-to-face time with their client, but they're going to have that information readily available quicker.
What are your thoughts on consumers using AI to review or write legal documents? What are the pitfalls?
That's a great question. And to be completely honest, I have used some of the more popular AI apps, I guess we can call them, to draft things like a contract or like a will, because I want to see what comes out. And I will tell you, most of the big AI applications, they will tell you something like, we are not a lawyer. You need to seek legal advice, but here is a business formation document we think looks good. And in most cases, they're about 90% accurate for what I would recommend. Sometimes the law is a little bit outdated. Sometimes some things are left out, but for the most part, they're okay. And I think if you're getting advice from AI, go to several different places. And if that advice looks like it's the same through 3 or 4 different applications, then you're probably on the right track. And then a lawyer can confirm that, but that can kind of narrow down your question. But I would be very careful seeking legal advice directly from AI and then taking that and either giving it to someone else or using that in my own practice.
That is sage wisdom, my friend, because AI, and I love AI, but AI is the output is only as good as the input. And if you don't know how to talk to AI, you have to be very careful, because a platform like a chat GPT, it is going to automatically be complimentary of whatever you do. It's trying to give you an outcome that they perceive to be a positive outcome. They're not necessarily using critical thinking, which could be very troublesome when dealing with legal documents. So that's one thing that's going to be really important that people look out for. So because we're getting close to wrapping the podcast, I do want to talk about something that I think is really important. Some business owners look over, and it's really having the proper insurance structures in place. I know this is something that you do deal with. If you're dealing with that business owner who, let's say they own their own business, they're creating widgets within their own physical space that they own, and they're doing $5 million a year in top line revenue, and they have 15 employees, what should that business owner make sure that they have in place from an insurance standpoint, from top down, to make sure that all their liability is covered?
Yeah, I've got 2 parts. And so I want to answer the question first and then, see if you have a follow-up. And then I've got a caveat I want to say at the end. What I tell most people, so you're looking at what you're doing right now revenue wise, your expenses and kind of what you expect, I would say for the next 2 to 5 years, you need an insurance policy that will cover that at least to some extent based on what you and your partners think you'll need for the next 2 to 5 years to operate the business, take care of expenses, that type of thing. So if I have $1 million revenue right now in my business and I'm thinking, okay, I want a $2 to $5 million policy for my business so that if something happened to me, I'm unable to work, I pass away, that money is there to help in the future, help my partner, or some of it could be paid out to my family. But you're thinking 2 to 5 years. And if there's growth included, you might even want to go up 20 to 30% at some point to account for that growth.
Got you. Okay.
The caveat that I will say, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's important to know. So whatever that insurance policy is, previously that insurance policy was not considered part of your taxable estate. So if you had a $5 million insurance policy on a business, then if you die, that policy does not get calculated in whatever you owe the federal government for your taxes. But some people were kind of using that as a workaround for some tax laws, and they would create a really big policy for a company. If they died, half of that policy would go out to pay for their family to continue to work for the business. And the IRS caught wind of that. So now, if you have an insurance policy relating to your business that's really there for operations-wise purposes, that can be considered part of your taxable estate as well. So if you haven't looked at that, if you have something in place, or if you're thinking about getting something in place, it could be considered part of your taxable estate. You just need to set it up correctly. And I still would recommend insurance for any business, but you want to make sure that you're not playing with the numbers too much where it can be a burden instead of a benefit.
Is there a world in which you should have a business policy and a personal policy that are separate?
I would say yes. And I think you need a couple of things. I think most people want some type of umbrella insurance policy that's personal, that will protect them in case the business can't cover a lawsuit. That umbrella policy protects your personal assets. And in most cases, you want a business policy that covers your business, maybe pays out some to your family. The personal policy that may pay out to your family or to your children or to a charity if you want. I think those could be separate. And you want to think about assets you have in the business versus your need. And hopefully as the business grows, that need may decrease as you continue to accumulate assets.
Okay. Gotcha. And if there's anything left over in that policy, that's the business policy, who does that go to? Does that go to the shareholders of the business, or does that revert to the family?
That's a good question. And that is a question that causes many lawsuits every single day. Hopefully your business agreement says where that money goes. So hopefully it's either directed to the business, and then the business would divide that between the shareholders, or if there are partners of the business, that would go in equal shares. But you really want to be careful that your company agreement says if a partner dies or is unable to work and that insurance policy pays out, that 60% goes to the business, 40% to the family, or whatever percent you have. You want that clearly set out in your company agreement.
One last question that's insurance based, and thank you for that, because that gives a lot of clarity. It is so important in all these legal documents that you are as clear as you possibly can be about every element. But let's talk about that you're operating a business and you are the key man. How important is key man insurance for a business operator?
It is very important. And depending on how many people you have counting on you in that business, you can imagine the amount that really it could harm multiple families if you don't have that insurance. And so for people who don't necessarily know what key man is, real quick, key man is basically where you've got someone who's really important to a business. They are the person who drives the business. And if something were to happen to them, the business would either shrink drastically or maybe go away altogether. That insurance policy is set up to provide for employees, for paying of expenses, but hopefully it will keep the business going until you can wind that business up, right? So you're not putting your employees out on the street right away. And anyone who's operating a business, whether they're a professional or they've created a business where they're the engine driving the business, right? That's a lot of you. you need to have something in place where I can pay for a certain amount of expenses, and you need to let your employees know if something were to happen to me, there is a 6-month plan or a 10-month plan or whatever that is, so that they understand what their future looks like as well. And those policies aren't ridiculously expensive, but they'll avoid heartache if something unexpected happens to you. You want to think about your employees and their families. That way they have some time to look into what they need to do and figure out how to move forward.
Awesome. I love it. Well, this was incredibly informative. Now we're going to do the fun part, the rapid fire section. Are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
If it was in a zombie apocalypse and you had to get out of your home and protect your family, what is your weapon of choice?
Ooh, I think a machete.
Oh, awesome. Chopping off heads. What is your favorite quote or phrase in business?
I would say, and this is really cliche, but I love the Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and it's been parodied a lot, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think if you're running a business and you have someone who, you're reaching out for a coffee with, or you're kind of embarrassed to talk to someone and share your business plan, the worst that can happen is they say they're not interested. So go talk to people you're not interested in necessarily long term, but if they show any interest in you, you never know what that door is going to open.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that. Is there a book that you would recommend our audience read on business?
Yes, any Warren Buffett book. He's written a couple of biographies and he's written a couple of books recently. I really like his ideas. I love what he does every year in terms of his letter to people. I think The Intelligent Investor is where I would start. But I would just follow Warren Buffett to a T.
I agree. Always meaty, really good, heady stuff that he writes about. What is the number one thing in 2025 that could kill a business?
I think not following up with your customers, not getting responses, not getting them to write reviews, and not following up on what the people like or don't like about your business. It's so easy now to get feedback from people that I just think you're really putting yourself behind the 8 ball if you're not asking people what they like or dislike about your business, because that's a really easy way to change things, turn things off, turn things up. And that's, you've got to do that and automate that.
God, that's great advice. And the last question that I have for you is, what is the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome in your business to build the success that you have today?
So when I'd been practicing about 4 years and we were with a large firm, and that firm within about a month decided not only to disband, but they just stopped operating altogether. And I had the choice at that point to go to another large firm and kind of get right back in the swing of things like we had been, big office, dress code, all of that, or to start my own business. And I took a risk there, and I have a great dad, I have a great law partner who we were able to take that risk, but I was terrified at the time, but I'm really glad that I did. And I think taking that risk and understanding if it doesn't work out, you can always pivot in a year or 6 months or 2 years, whatever you need to do, but go take that risk short term, especially if you've got time to work or time to build, because you're really going to be happier that you took the risk. Even if it doesn't work out, it may show you, what you want to do down the road. Instead of just getting right back in the rat race and doing something that you're comfortable with, get outside that comfort zone and take that risk, at least short term.
Wow. Amazing advice. Travis, please tell our audience where they can reach you if they'd like to do so.
Absolutely. So I have a website. It is weaverlegal.net. It's how you can contact our office, but honestly, it's got a lot of information about what we do, about what I would recommend, and just things you can do to research your own situation. I explain different documents and why they could be important to you or why they couldn't be. We put all of our prices up there, flat fee. So there's transparency in terms of what we charge and what you can expect. And I'd love for you to do your own research, get a bunch of questions and come in and ask me, because I like talking about this and I like working with people.
Awesome. Travis Weaver, thank you for joining us on 0 to 100.
Thanks for tuning in to 0 to 100 podcast. We hope you feel inspired and ready to accelerate your business. Remember, your journey to success starts with a single step. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for greatness. For more resources and show notes, visit jaredguyrandolph.com. We'll see you next time.